and I call it Ja'fari fiqh and the explosion of Imami Shia sects in Kufa. And this covers the years 122 to 260 Hijri. And we begin with talking about what happened after Zaid was abandoned. Zaid was defeated, he was martyred, they killed him, and he was crucified after his own Shia isolated him. The extremist Saba Shia, who now became known as the Rafidah, went back to Kufa and simply chose another Hashemite in Medina as their Imam and leader. They dropped Zaid, who they considered a leader, when they sensed that he was going to fail, and they went to somebody else. At this point, the fabricating of narrations was at an all-time high. A lot of fabrications were being attributed to Ahlul Bayt. Some of the scholars, I recall Ishaq bin Rahuya said maybe 300,000 narrations were invented in Kufa about Ahlul Bayt. And obviously, a lot of these narrations were conflicting, and this led to different varying beliefs among the Shia and the creation of many Shia sects. There was plenty of other Shia sects at this point. Each sect had varying beliefs, even though many of them claimed to be following the same leader. Like all of them, you'd have 6, 7, 8 sects, all of them claiming to be following Ja'far, and each one having different beliefs. And it got to really terrible points where every Shia leader almost had a sect. So an important figure, an important Hashemite figure that we have to mention at this time, in Medina he was, and his name was Ja'far bin Muhammad. His title was Al-Sadiq, and Ja'far was a jurist in Medina. He had taken knowledge from his father, as well as some of the top senior followers of the Prophet ﷺ in the city of Medina. And his father was a scholar of hadith, but Ja'far was a faqih, he was a jurist. When Ja'far attained good knowledge, he himself began teaching in Medina, and he made a name for himself alongside the top scholars in that city. His reputation reached Kufa, of course, and many of the Shia there began ascribing themselves to him and spread his opinions. They began to spread his judicial opinions, his opinions on religious verdicts and whatnot. Unfortunately, liars appeared. Some would claim to be his companions. Some would claim to be close associates of Ja'far, even though they never even met him or even talked to him. And some of them would meet him maybe once during Hajj in the year. And these individuals had ambitions, and they wanted influence and wanted authority over the Shia. These guys were simply politicians. These Shia leaders were simply politicians. Now, a lot of these lies are they're reflected in today's Shia books. If you read the Shia books today, especially the books of hadith, books of jurisprudence, you'll find their jurists holding many opinions on the same exact matter. Like you'll find multiple opinions, and this is simply due to conflicting reports attributed to Ja'far al-Sadiq, whom most of their religion is narrated from Ja'far al-Sadiq, as they say. Each Shia sect was narrating a different story from Ja'far al-Sadiq. The Nusayris had a hadith from Ja'far al-Sadiq. The Zaidis are narrating from Ja'far al-Sadiq. Each group was narrating something from Ja'far al-Sadiq. Going back to the Shia leaders in Kufa, they would simply trick their followers, by bringing statements, letters from Ja'far. Obviously, a lot of these would be forged letters. The simple Kufan Shia would be overjoyed, and they would reward the Shia leaders with both wealth and loyalty, and they become people of repute in their society. They become leaders in their society. They're able to build leadership based on the naive Shia followers. The simple Shia, of course, they had no idea if Ja'far actually said those words, but they simply took the words of the Shia leaders for it. If Zurara, who was a Shia leader, if Zurara told you something, no, Zurara's probably honest, probably right. Even though Zurara wasn't honest, he was a liar. In the unfortunate case where, and this is mainly because the leaders of the Shia, like Jafar, was in Medina, whereas in these simpleton Shias all lived in Kufa, and that was a very far away land, and so a lot of them had no chance of meeting Jafar Sadiq or asking Jafar Sadiq. Now, if a Shia actually got the opportunity and he was able to gather the provisions and wealth and was able to travel all the way to Medina and meet Jafar, they wouldn't a lot of the time they wouldn't even have access to him, because Jafar was always surrounded as a scholar inside his scholarly circles. He would be surrounded by his students, by his followers, by his close companions in Medina. And if those Shia were able to access some of these lectures, they would sometimes hear things that are to the contrary of what their own Shia leaders are telling them. And they would be confused. Like, why is Jafar speaking something which is the opposite of what my leader, of what Zurara or what, Al-Ahwal told me? And so they would return back to Kufa and complain to these Shia leaders. Now, what would the Shia leaders say? The Shia leaders had a very good excuse that they kept using over and over and over, and they keep using it until our days today. They said that the Imam is surrounded by Sunnis in Medina. He can't state his true beliefs openly or publicly. Or they would say, oh, there were government spies waiting to pounce on the Imam if he spoke the truth. And even got so ridiculous that some Shia would get the rare chance to meet Jafar privately, and he would still say the contrary, even in private, even when there was no surrounding people that you could say, oh, spies and whatnot. And they would come back to their Shia leaders and tell them, well, there was nobody else. There's no Sunnis, there's no government spies, it was just me and the Imam, and he still told me the opposite of what you're preaching, Mr. Zurara. And so Zurara, for example, would say, well, the Imam intentionally misguides his Shia because if they are united upon one opinion, they will appear stronger. And so authorities would persecute them if they appeared strong. And this last one, this is a Sahih hadith in the books of the Shia. They claim that their Imams were intentionally spreading lies. So it's not just a matter of the Imams hiding the true beliefs out of fear of Sunnis, because they were always surrounded by Sunnis in Medina. So, in brief, the Shia leaders taught their followers that whenever faced with conflicting reports, take whatever religious opinion opposes the majority of Muslims. This caused a split in the nation, and thus the Shia became more isolated, and differences grew little by little, because the Shia were now taking everything that opposes Sunnis. If Jafar said two things, if you hear two different reports from Jafar, one agrees with the rest of the Muslims and one disagrees with the rest of the Muslims, the Shia would take only the one that disagrees with the rest of the Muslims, because they consider the first one to be misguided opinion. The scholars of Ahlul Bayt, would hear some of these rumors and would hear some of what was going on. And the scholars of Ahlul Bayt would curse a lot of those individuals in Kufa who attributed lies to them, same way Zurara was cursed. The response of the Shia leaders, usually, and their followers, would be that the Imam cursed this or that Shia leader to push him away from harm. Because maybe the government had their eyes on this man, that he's a representative of the divine Imam, and then they want to clear him from danger, so they intentionally curse him so that the government leaves him alone. And you can tell these are all weak excuses. You'd have to be really weak-minded to believe these things, but unfortunately, Shia of our days believe these, and the Shia of back then, a lot of them believe these. And I'm talking about the extremists, the Rafidah and the Saba'i, obviously, the Imamis. All of the above, all of this mess that we just talked about can be summarized in one word: taqiyya. At-taqiyya was a belief that emerged during this time, and it is adopted by the Shia until our very day and heavily used. So this is the emergence of taqiyya as a Shia belief, and this is why they used it. And it definitely is a better excuse than bada', because bada' is claiming that something appeared to God and God didn't see the future and didn't know the future, and therefore God changed his opinion. This seemed to be a more practical excuse, and this became more popular. And they stopped using bada' at some point, started using only taqiyya. Not only were were there Shia in Kufa attributing to Ja'far various religious opinions, fiqh opinions and whatnot. There were some that claimed that Ja'far was divinely appointed. Some of his companions claimed to be prophets. Some of the companions of Ja'far, those who claimed to be his companions, went and claimed that they were prophets. Other claims to be gods. Other claimed Ja'far himself was God. So again, they were all narrating the same things from Ja'far. Things didn't get any better after Ja'far died. Actually, it got worse. Some claimed he never died and that they considered him the Mahdi. For example, the same way the Saba'is considered Ali the Mahdi, and the same way Kaysanites considered Muhammad Hanafiya the Mahdi. The followers of Ja'far considered Ja'far the Mahdi, and that he never really died. Different Shia sects at this point in time had different Mahdis. Then they deferred on his children, who was going to succeed him as the leader. Each sect started fabricating narrations. One sect said his son Muhammad is the leader. Another sect said his son Abdullah was the leader. Another sect said his son Musa was the leader, and so on and so forth. And as for the number of leaders, the total number of leaders, where do you put the cap on that? Well, some Shia believe that the Imams were 5, and they were called fivers. Some Shia believe that the Imams were 7. There was no concept of 12 Imams. What the Shia preach today, this did not exist. These extremists, they engaged in debates, and with time they began building an arsenal of arguments, theological arguments. They also developed their own theology and creed. They developed a belief that it is from God's grace that there is always an infallible leader, and so the belief in infallibility spread, to guide deviants and correct mistakes in religion. These groups became famous as the Imami Shia. All of these groups became now famous as the Imami Shia. And this is a title they like, as opposed to Rafidah, which is a title they dislike. And so they were saying that, yes, there has to always be a divinely appointed leader to guide the nation, otherwise the mistakes would creep in and this and that. And these guys, they did not believe that the Imam can go into hiding and just disappear and never come back, because that conflicted with their beliefs that there always had to be an Imam that guides the people to correct religious opinions. This later caused a massive confusion. With time, different beliefs fell into place and were adopted. Infallibility became more widespread as opposed to the early days. The belief in additional inspired holy books, such as Mus'haf Fatima. Mus'haf Fatima is a book that a lot of them invented. They came up with this idea, and they attributed it to Fatima. And they're like, oh, Fatima had a book, and the angel descended upon Fatima, and Ali ibn Abi Talib was writing the contents of the revelation of this angel, and this angel was simply telling them about prophecies and future events and what would happen to her and her children. You know, basically another Quran, technically. And then there was the Quran of Ali, that they claimed that Ali had a specific Quran that was exclusive to him, and that this Quran was very different from the Quran of the rest of the nation. The order of the verses is different, the content is different, it's not tampered, and they started preaching that the Quran is tampered. That the Mus'haf we have now with us, the Quran, is changed. And it had like all the divine explanations and all of that yada 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 nonsense that they believed. Obviously this Quran, nobody's ever seen it, nobody's ever heard of it. They claim that it's being transmitted in secret from each Imam to the next, without anybody else having access to it. And now they claim it's with the Mahdi. Like the 12 Shia that are available in our days, they claim that this secret Quran is with the Mahdi, and he's going to bring it when he emerges. Another book they have is a Jafr, for example, and the Jafr is basically, it's more of a container, and it contains previous prophetic scriptures and relics and stuff, you know, previous books of past prophets. They had another book which is called Kitab al-Muluk, the Book of Kings, and it contained the name of all of the kings that will rule the earth from the beginning of time until the end of time. So all of these made-up books, basically, were invented by the extremist Shia, attributed to the Imams, and you still find a lot of these in the Shia literature today. Another important thing that became important for them was money. And so khums, 1/5 tax, became a project for many of the Kufan Shia, especially the top leaders, and some volunteers to collect it on behalf of the Imam. And a lot of these guys would be stealing, putting stuff in their pockets. Obviously, nobody was keeping watch, and they became rich off of khums. With large sums of money, of course. Leadership became more corrupt. Shia leadership became a lot more corrupt. Influence spread, and the Shia leaders reached high positions in the government, especially the Abbasi government. They had high positions in this government. There's a lot of Shia in these governments. As for the commoner, the Shi'is of the time, whenever an imam dies, the Shia always split into multiple groups, as we said previously. Some groups would claim that the imam never died and that he went into occultation. Some would claim that he died, but the leadership went to his sons. Then they differed on which son it is. You know, each group fabricates hadith, each claiming that it's a different son, and they would disagree with each other. Obviously, one group would win at the end of the day and became majority. And if this guy that they chose as the next imam, if he dies without leaving behind children, that would be a problem. And so some of them would usually claim that he's a liar. Others, they would claim that they were tricked by him, and they would switch to believe in like one of his brothers or one of his uncles or somebody, and so on and so forth, just so that they can, you know, so that there would be continuity, so that, you know, their religion wouldn't be extinct. They found a way to keep going, keep collecting money, keep preserving their status and prestige and influence in Kufa. And from all of this clear historical background, we know that the Shia never had a clue about the exact identity of their imams. None of them knew their imams by names. The imams were being figured out every single time after an imam died. They would have to figure out who's next. They never had a list of them, even though they claim they do today, but that conflicts with the history of the Shia. It also conflicts with them even knowing what the number is. There was no such thing as 12 imams. A lot of the Shia would claim that so-and-so is the Mahdi after he passes away. And if they claim that he's a Mahdi, like if they claim that the 6th or 7th or 8th imam is a Mahdi, that means they don't believe that the total is 12. Because the Mahdi is the last one. And it's sufficient as evidence that the majority of Musa al-Qadim's companions, for example, he was one of their imams, the majority of his companions never acknowledged Ali Rida, his son, as his successor, as opposed to most of the Shia nowadays. They never acknowledged him. Now this, as in all good things, it had to come to an end. It just couldn't keep going. They couldn't keep it up. They had to fall badly at one point. And this happened in the time of Al-Hasan al-Askari, who was the imam of many of the Shia in his time. He was a rich man. He was influential. Imamis were pretty much under his banner at this point. And a lot of the Shia representatives were collecting money in his name. The man, unfortunately, died without leaving behind a son. So he left all of his followers in a state of confusion. And they couldn't get out of it. It was really a tough situation for them. And he was the 11th imam for a lot of these Shia. He was imam number 11. And he clearly died. Everybody saw him die. So they couldn't say that he went into occultation, even though that didn't stop some of them from saying he went into occultation. The Shi'i after him, the Shia, the Imami Shia, the extremists, they split into about, some people say 12 groups, some people say 20 groups. Let's say about 13 groups. So some of the Shia, some of the followers of Hasan al-Askari, some said he didn't have a son, so they disbelieved in him and returned to believe in the leadership of other imams, previous imams. Some became Sunni. They left the whole thing altogether. Some claimed he never died and went into hiding. Some said he died and will return as the Mahdi. Some said, some actually awaited patiently for a sign, were confused and made tawaqquf. They didn't know what to do. They remained in confusion, basically. And so on and so forth. One of his servants, a female servant, she was probably bribed by some of the Shia leaders and claimed that she was pregnant. After the imam died, she claimed that she was pregnant, even though there was no signs of pregnancy on her. And that she was carrying his son, and that his son was the Mahdi after his death, and that the lineage was going to continue, basically. And that got exposed, and they got into trouble, whoever was involved in this, because the authorities came, and there was a huge issue, which we'll talk about in detail in maybe some other videos. Some said his son was born in his lifetime, right? But nobody saw this son, so they had a problem, so they started making stuff up. that he was born and that he grows quickly. So he quickly grew into an adult. Like in a few weeks, he was an adult. And that nobody saw him because he was carried to the sky by birds. And some hadith, they say he was carried to the sky by angels, and he was hidden. And then he went into occultation. And this is the 12th Imam. And by the way, this is what the majority of the 12 Shia of our days believe. And this is the belief of the 12 Shia. And with this, we conclude by saying that those who believe basically that this 11th Imam had a son, all of these groups that believe that he had a son were called 12 Shia because they believed in 12. And all of these groups are pretty much now extinct except for one group, which is the group that you see dominant today in Iran and in southern Iraq. And these are the 12 Shia. And that is the group that believes in the bird story. And that is the origin of the Shia. So I'm hoping this was helpful for everybody. I'm hoping you learn where the Shia came from, how they evolved and developed, and how it is that they have the beliefs that they have today. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.